What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So we've of course talked quite a bit about Sony's push to PC with their single-player first-party games, and there have been discussions back and forth about if it is the correct move. Well, now we're seeing more and more data get out there from these PC game releases that seem to be backing up their big PC push, and we'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a pretty awesome feature that's coming out for the GameCube, one that will most likely have people replaying some of their favorite games from that generation all over again. And I'm also be talking about the original Xbox, as there is a pretty major breakthrough now in the hardware scene that is going to have that system punching well above its weight once again. So if you guys enjoy this video, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if new here to the SpawnWave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early. If you'd like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with the Yakuza or Like a Dragon series, and RGG, as they had a panel at Anime Expo, and they seem to tease maybe some thoughts about the next entry in the franchise, which we can see. This is posted up. This is over on Twitter X. It's from Yakuza Guy at AX, there you go. They say, quote, "We can't tell you what kind of game it is, but I will tell you, you will be surprised." Now, this is apparently a panel that RGG had here at the at Anime Expo, a fandom panel, just kind of going back and forth about plans for the future, and you'll be surprised. So I think the most surprising thing that I could think of in recent time was their shift to a turn-based RPG setup, and it does make me wonder if they're going to once again shift just the structure of the game again, as they've done this turn-based RPG thing now, twice. They had Yakuza Like a Dragon, then Infinite Wealth, like the two big mainline titles there. So I do wonder if they're going to try something completely different from that. And I don't know, do they go to like a strategy RPG setup? Do they go completely off the rails even from that, as they had like action game, and they had turn-based? It's hard to say is it gonna be a racing game? I don't know. It's hard to say because they're doing all kinds of interesting things, we'll say, and it keeps working out with the characters and the story that they've created with that world. So I have a lot of faith they're gonna come up with something really, really good, but I gotta say, I am very curious as to how far they're gonna take this thing when it comes to the genre and structure of the next game. Also, Astro's Playroom got another update, which it looks like, yes, they're gonna do an update every single month leading up to launch of Astrobot, which is a lot of fun, I think, and it does help to pass the time a bit, but the update keeps hiding a new bot in the world for you to go find. And there's a riddle that accompanies this for you to do certain steps to eventually get this new bot that will then accompany you into the new game. You'll have them as like your starting lineup, I guess, a roster of these different bots that you find. But we can see this over on PlayStation Blog. They have a picture here of the two that have been discovered so far. Of course, we have Bloodborne and then Returnal representation, and then two others. One seems pretty obvious. It looks like Ape Escape representation. August, I guess people are already kind of kicking it back and forth what that could be, but I think here we have the two, and there have been a lot of fun to go through and find them. It seems like the community's figured this out pretty quickly with both updates, and the Returnal one I think was definitely easier than the Bloodborne one, and it sounds like they're hinting that August and September will actually be quite a bit harder, since it was very easy seemingly for the community to figure this out. But yeah, if you haven't fired up Astro's Playroom in a while, I recommend doing so, because these were a lot of fun to find, and you got a trophy or new trophy for each one, so there's something there, of course, to add to the collection that way. Oh, and we did have the release announcement for basketball in Nintendo Switch Sports. This was posted up over on the official account, and yeah, it's out today. Basketball arrives in Nintendo Switch Sports on July 9th. I'm very curious still how this exactly is going to play, like actually play, doing the motion, of course, shoot the basketball and stuff. And I know they've talked about over on Game & Talk doing this as like a competition for their Battle of the Sexes, and that should be a lot of fun. But still, like, having these different updates come out later on, while it hasn't necessarily been drip feed for Switch Sports, they kind of just seemingly forgot about it for a while, and they come back with basketball. It's something, but this is all stuff that I think would have been awesome to have just at launch in general, and that goes for a lot of their sports titles, but still, something fun there. It's a free update, so if you have Switch Sports and you've just kind of forgotten about it, go ahead and fire it up and try out basketball, see how it goes. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the recent report that was released from Circana, who was previously NPD, but just gave us the month-to-month sales and placements in the US. And this chart in particular was very interesting because it shows just how much of an effect that Sony's PC releases are having on these charts, as one, just jumped like 70 spots up to first. And it's a game that Sony released years ago. First, though, let's start with the consoles, which you can see Matt Piscatella sharing this over on Twitter X, where he says, May video game hardware spending declined 40% when compared to a year ago. Still $202 million, though, so it's not like a little bit of money's coming through. Still quite a bit, but obviously the thing that's happening right now, as is mentioned, all current generation hardware platforms are showing double-digit percentage declines year on year in 2024, with the Switch showing the most significant drop, and you'd kind of expect that with how old the Switch is now, that most people want one, they have one, so there's not as much of a demand to rush out and pick up more Switch systems. But still, the PS5 and the Xbox Series also being down is, well, at least for PlayStation, is interesting. I feel like most people are just expecting Xbox to constantly be down, the way Microsoft's sort of talking about their console, even in recent advertising for things like the Amazon Fire TV app. No console, no problem. It's like, oh, well, that's an interesting way to sell your Xbox system. But either way, Matt Piscatella also shared PlayStation 5 again led the month's hardware market in unit and dollar sales. Nintendo Switch once again finished second in unit sales, while Xbox Series ranked second in dollars, which makes sense considering there's a $500 Xbox Series X out there, as opposed to the most expensive Switch being $350. He also launched a line these consoles in the US in the first 43 months, for example, with the PS5, leading those of the PlayStation 4 by 8%, while the Xbox Series trails Xbox One by 13% and remains slightly behind the Xbox 360. So for Sony, I do believe the PS5, at least in the US, will either hold steady with the PS4, might even outsell it there. I have more questions around like Japan and other parts of the world. But I will say the US with the Xbox Series trailing the Xbox One by 13% right now, 43 months in. Yeah, that's not great. There's no way you could look at that and say, okay, that's good. I mean, I know Microsoft's push has obviously been for things outside of just the console itself, the box that you buy and put on your TV. But it's not exactly a good statistic to throw out there, being behind the Xbox One that famously fell on its face right out of the gate. Now, moving over to software, we can see for May 2024, the #1 selling game, and this is physical and digital, as we'll have to point out that some games don't have digital copies counted. But we can see Ghost of Tsushima is #1, and that's because of that Steam release. It propelled it up 70 spots, as the month prior was at 71, of course, selling on the PS4 and the PS5. Yeah, that's a pretty substantial jump from a PC release. Now, right below that, we can see Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. That is just counting physical copies, as Nintendo does not share digital sales with Circana. Then we have Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Helldivers 2, MLB The Show 24. Now, they mention here digital sales on Nintendo and Xbox platforms not included again. Nintendo doesn't share them, and I guess in this case, neither does Microsoft. And then we have Sea of Thieves, Minecraft, Elden Ring, Hogwarts Legacy, and Stellar Blade rounding out the top 10. And as I mentioned, this is pretty big for PlayStation, I'd say, as it shows that, yes, the strategy of releasing on PC is bringing in extra money after the initial release, even years later. But I think it also shows that they are building up sort of their base on PC when it comes to their PlayStation Studios games. And I do wonder if Sony is also looking at this like, okay, this is something we released years later, and it still propelled this game up to the #1 spot in Circana for the US. What would happen if we released a single-player game like this on PlayStation 5 and on PC day one? How much larger would those PC sales be with that initial marketing hype behind it? Because that's another big thing, is a game like this, when it comes out on PC, doesn't get the same push that it did when it first came out on PlayStation 5 consoles. So you do wonder about that, PS5, PC. How much of an overlap is there, and how much would it really hurt their console sales? As I mentioned before, the PlayStation brand has kind of become just the default system for the mainstream. And with what we're seeing right now from Xbox, it's not like there's a ton of competition necessarily on store shelves for like, which console should I pick up? So there's a chance that Sony could still release a day one release single player, PlayStation 5 and PC, and it really not do much damage to their console sales, and they would just get a bunch of money from PC alongside of it. I think it's certainly something they're kicking around right now in the background, but as they've mentioned, even recently, their strategy is still PlayStation 5 console release, then months, years later even, we'll put it on PC. But I do wonder if that's something that will still hold up a year or two down the line as they head into next generation, when those costs continue to grow, at times exponentially. But for now, Ghost of Tsushima, I mean, big showing here with Circana at number 1. And then yes, even Paper Mario, while it's just physical copies, it's a GameCube remake that Nintendo kind of just put out there, and that did pretty well also. Which, for how much money that probably cost Nintendo to make, I think they're pretty happy with where it ended up. Next up, let's talk about a feature heading to the GameCube when it comes to emulation, which I think this is really, really cool, as I've experienced this on other systems with those handhelds you can pick up, the retro handhelds that are fairly cheap now, like the RG35XX, the Miu Mini. Now we're seeing the ability for achievements to find their way into different games. And the way this works, there's a website, which you can see that site here, and it is called retroachievements.org. The way this works, you sign up for an account here, and it will track achievements that you have in a bunch of different retro games. We're going back to like the old systems from the 80s. You can do those, and it will track them linked to your account as you go along with community-driven achievements for each game. In most of these emulators now, they're building in ways, like with RetroArch even, where you can sign in, and what happens then is when you play these games on emulator, it'll call to the website and will unlock these achievements and attach them to your profile. So it adds, I think, a lot of replayability for games that you may have already beaten over and over and over again, or wanting to go through it for the first time, yes, to just achievement hunt, which is really funny to think that you might start up a Super Nintendo game so that you can try to get all 51 out of 51 achievements that are set up. But now GameCube will be getting these. In fact, over on the forum for retroachievements.org, there's an entire thread right now announcing it July 15th, 2024, so next week. Yes, we will have achievements going live, and they have a very large list of games right now, and I was looking at some of them, and the fact that you can go through Beautiful Joe and get a bunch of achievements, or Mario Golf, 1080 Avalanche, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. They also include different ROM hacks as well, which is kind of neat to have that. I think the way this works is you can pretty much submit like achievements in general for any game, and then I guess the community kind of works together to build out what should be a fair list of achievements. I will say though, sometimes I'll sign into a game and it's like, oh yeah, there's 98 achievements for this 2D Castlevania side scroll, and it's like, what am I gonna do for 92? What is that exactly? 92 achievements. How many is it? Like every single enemy I kill or something, I get an achievement? Sometimes it's kind of an overflow of different things you can do in the game. But again, I think when you have the right mix of them, especially with something like the GameCube library and some of those classic titles, it's a blast. It's pretty easy to set up. So yeah, I recommend checking it out if you're curious, and you would have to use Dolphin for this specifically according to their thread. RetroArch, unfortunately, doesn't seem to have the compatibility for it, but most people by now probably use Dolphin if they're going to be emulating any of these different GameCube games. Next up, let's talk about an awesome upgrade for the original Xbox when it comes to just hardware. Now, I've done a lot of hardware mods on different systems, and the original Xbox is one of those where I added HDMI, and I doubled the RAM capacity up to 128 megabytes from 64 megabytes. And there are games that will actually use that extra RAM. Half-Life is one. I did a video on Halo 2, how all of a sudden you could have it running at 720p, like native 720p, with the original Xbox for a game that was very graphically demanding, and that additional RAM allows you to have that sort of an image in real time, which is cool. But now we're seeing them push things even further to 256 megabytes, 4 times the original RAM allocation for the original Xbox has been achieved, and it's actually been decent enough. So there have been ways that people have theorized you could do this where you'd stack RAM chips on top of each other. Now there's a much cleaner approach with a custom board that's been made that allows you to then put RAM modules in place of the stock ones. Like, so for example, we can see this is posted up. This is over on Time Extension. Now they're pointing out Prehistoric Man, who has created this, and it seems like it's taken them years to make this a reality, but there is a new RAM module that's made of 2 parts. There's a RAM chip and an interposer, which essentially will attach that RAM chip to like the long legs that you see coming out of the RAM chips that would be stock for it. And that way you can use some of these newer RAM chips in place of them. And after you change out 8 slots, yes, you will end up with 256 megabytes of RAM. I noticed Macho Nacho did a whole video on this. This was really interesting to see. So definitely check that video out if you just want to see the process. The only issue we're running into right now is There's not really a reason to do it yet. Now, look, I think there will be in the future because as soon as 128 megabytes of RAM became more of a reality for most people, where we found out you could just change the RAM chips out, that's when you started to see mods happen for different games to take advantage of that and get better resolution, for example, or run Half-Life outright on the original Xbox. So in this case, because this doesn't seem to be something outlandish to figure out, which, as I mentioned, stacking RAM chips and moving around and rewiring legs, most people aren't doing that. Most people probably aren't going to do this either, but it's at least something that's more approachable, right? Where you can just order these boards and replace them, solder them down. That's not anything that I think is out of the realm of possibility for most people who are opening up and modifying their original Xbox systems, which means we'd probably see at least some modification for games or homebrew that would utilize 256 megabytes of RAM, which could even come down to you just outright loading up something like a Linux OS on the original Xbox from 2001. I just think this stuff is really cool to see these kind of breakthroughs happen like 23 years later for some of these systems. And the original Xbox, still a very popular system to mod, and one that I actually end up recommending to most people who are just kind of getting into the modding scene. What system's a good one to start with in soft mod? Gotta be the original Xbox. It just has so much support, and seeing breakthroughs like these still happen, it's a very current modding scene, actually. So really cool stuff. I might look into getting some of these and just trying it out, maybe making a video around it, but I would like to have at least something to use the 256 megabytes of RAM for when it's all done and installed, whether it's a game modification, some piece of homebrew, something to show 256 megabytes of RAM in action. But for now, check out Macho Nacho's video to see the process and decide if it's something you might want to try in the future. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Hideki Kamiya and him kind of burying the old team that worked on Okami. It was an interesting video or interview that he did. We can see this is posted up. This is over on Eurogamer with Kamiya discussing the development of Okami with Kumi Nakamura for the YouTube channel. That's for her new studio, Unseen. He said, quote, "Even Okami, did it make 150,000 units? The initial shipment was 90,000. It was a huge failure. If it had been successful, Clover would have probably continued." Capcom shut down Clover like the next year or something after Okami came out because, I mean, it was just a flop out of the gate. Even Kamiya is saying it here, which it came out in 2006. And I hate to say it, that was a time period while the PS2 was still very current. People were playing it. People were talking about the PS3, the Xbox 360 had come out. That's such a tough time to kind of gauge interest for even a game like Okami that wasn't God of War 2 or something, you know? So that's kind of tough. But as they say, our Nakamura, for instance, recalled a party near the end of Okami's development where Kamiya said, "This team was the worst." Kamiya then elaborated further, explaining how Okami's development team was meant to be a dream team, and Okami Clover Studio's signature title. However, he described the team as a whole as weak due to different levels of passion from staff. Nakamura agreed, and Kamiya stated he can be honest because we are friends. He just kind of buried like the original staff for Okami, and he said he doesn't really get the idea of it being this landmark title or this like almost cult classic, which it is a very good game. So I'm going to disagree with him on that, but he says there was so much more we could have done, but he keeps saying that the team was different levels of motivation is like the kind way to put it for the way it was kind of, I don't know if it's that, maybe that old school mentality, because remember, this was in development before 2006, that thought process of staying really late at the office, sleeping there, getting this stuff done, devoting everything to it, that kind of mentality. But the fact that there was still more they wanted to do, and I feel like we ended up with an awesome game in Okami, it does make me wonder what other plans they had for it. But ever since then, I mean, we had the Okami HD that came out in 2017. If you look on Capcom's Platinum list, it's upwards of 2.5 million units that have sold. So while it wasn't strong out of the gate, I feel like it's just sold really well over time. And now we're at a point where maybe Capcom wants to get creative and weird and try a new one. I'm not really counting on it because they won't even really touch Mega Man other than remasters and collections there. So I feel like Capcom is in a great spot to take more chances, and maybe Okami is one of those. It was just an interesting interview here with Kamiya, definitely not holding back on what he thought of the original development of Okami and the people he worked with. And before we go to the comments of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played Okami? Oh wow, 63% say no, 37% say yes. I have good news, Okami HD is usually like on sale for $10. It's very cheap, 60, 70% off even at times. So I absolutely think it's worth the price of half a Fortnite skin. I mean, that's where we are with the cost of some of these games now. It's like, do I buy Okami HD or do I re-up the new Battle Pass for this season? Like, Okami HD, obviously. Okay, so that is a classic. It's worth picking up. It's basically on everything at this point, and I would like to see Capcom do something else with it, especially with those sales numbers, but it's probably also reached those sales numbers because it's been so cheap for so long. Still, though, it seems like there are many people out there right now who are missing out on greatness, so check out Okami HD when you get a chance. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Kim, who says, speaking of GameCube, I really wish Nintendo had released Luigi's Mansion 1 HD alongside Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. Well, what can you do? At least we have 2 and 3 on there. I'm playing Luigi's Mansion 2 HD right now, and I'm having so much fun. Luigi's Mansion 2 is a good game. Like, the biggest criticism, obviously, is they took the 3DS game, basically smoothed out the visuals, made it so it was more proper for a big HD screen in the living room, and then just put it out there. And then they charged $60 for that. That was kind of it, right? So I do wonder if there are plans for Luigi Mansion 1, mostly because, like, you look around and you see them get most of the Xenoblade series on the Switch, see most of the Metroid stuff on the Switch, almost. I still think Prime 2 and 3 are coming, but you kind of look around and see them just completing all of these different series on one system that has sold really well for them. Why not complete the Luigi Mansion series at this point? I mean, you took one from the 3DS, moved up, take the other from the 3DS, because Luigi Mansion 1 did go to that system randomly, by the way, so why not move it up and drop it there, unless there really are plans for a GameCube NSO section, and maybe they're holding it back for that, along with my Wavebird, because we absolutely need that too. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Was Ghost of Tsushima jumping 70 spots up to #1 because of a PC release? You think there's a future for Sony to realize, oh wow, there's actually a lot of money we can make, and make the move for that single-player game on PlayStation 5 and PC day one? Then also, what about the GameCube getting achievements? Have you gone back and played any retro games with a website like this to just unlock different achievements as you go through? And the original Xbox, 256 megabytes of RAM now. Have you considered maybe modifying the original Microsoft Xbox? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.